there are several situations where it makes a lot of sense to do a macronutrient adjustment, and I want to talk about those today. When you should adjust your macros. There is a life after macros. You are not intended to be in a caloric deficit for a prolonged period of time. So I want to thank you guys for subscribing to the channel and for just all of the awesome comments and feedback that you guys have been leaving. If you are a new follower, there are tons of videos on this channel about how to calculate your macros, lots of tutorials. However, one thing that I get a lot of questions about is when you should adjust your macros. And there are several situations where it makes a lot of sense to do a macronutrient adjustment, and I want to talk about those today. So the first reason why you would want to adjust your macros would be if you've plateaued. So this means that you've been truly following your macros, you've been following at 100%, and you are no longer experiencing changes to your physique as gauged by a change in your measurements. I am not talking about changes in the scale. I'm talking about if you are truly 110% following your current macros and you are not seeing changes in your measurements. Specifically, if you are not seeing changes in the smallest part of your waist or the part of your waist that is around the circumference of your belly button. If you are not seeing a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch drop, if you are on a fat loss oriented program on either of those two measurements on a weekly basis, and if it doesn't change after approximately 10 days, you probably want to adjust your macros because in my opinion, that is a plateau. Another reason why you would want to adjust your macros would be under the circumstances of pregnancy. So once you find out you are expecting, your nutrition requirements are going to change, but not as drastically as you would think. And this is definitely not the time to be in a caloric deficit. Number 3 is breastfeeding. So for those that choose to nurse and are trying to drop body fat, they will need to follow completely different protocols when it comes to macros to support the loss of nutrients through breast milk and macros via lactation. So under those circumstances, if you are breastfeeding, you will need a specific type of macro adjustment. Number 4, a change in activity. If you've recently started working out more frequently or you're doing more rigorous activity and you didn't properly account for this when you initially did your macro calculation, if you're feeling extra hungry all the time, this would definitely be a circumstance under which you need to adjust your macros. Number 5 is a change in your rate of progress. So let's say you've calculated your macros for yourself and you're finding that it's either way too challenging, meaning you look at the amount of food you have to eat in a day and you're hungry and even though you would be fine and you could follow it, but if it's just too challenging for you and you think you may need to go about your goal at a slower rate, or vice versa, if you're feeling great, you're breezing through your current macros, maybe you were a little bit too liberal with your calculations, which is a good thing, then you can dial it back and make sure you get to your goal faster. I think it's always a little bit better to be a little bit more on the conservative side, meaning allowing yourself to have more food, slightly higher macros, and then only dropping it back if you are just not feeling hungry or if you are just feeling very comfortably full with less food, and then at that point you can make those adjustments. And number 6, you've reached your goal. So now what? If you have been following your macros, you've reached your goal, and the thing is, you guys, I've said this a million times, there is a life after macros. You are not intended to be in a caloric deficit for a prolonged period of time. And if you find yourself under following those circumstances, you do need to reverse diet out of your current macros and bring yourself back into a maintenance level. You don't need to be in a restriction forever. And the whole goal here isn't to put you in a place where you are calculating, tracking your entire life. The whole goal is to use macros as a tool and a blueprint to get you where you need to be so that you can sustain that state. So I've been having more and more people actually reach their goals, which is amazing, which means you guys are doing a good job. That means you're following a science-based approach as opposed to an approach based off of willpower. The thing is, it's always a great thing when you reach your goal, but you do need to reassess and readjust your macros at that point. So if there's any questions or concerns as to how and what and when you should be doing this, please comment below and I'm happy to answer any questions. Take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.